worried about impeachment, Mr. President?
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little teeny bit. He might not be worried about impeachment, but it has become a campaign issue right up there with the economy and health care. Most Democrats choosing to kick the can instead of giving a direct answer. As the New York Times reports, quote, underpinning the candidates' calculations are complex sets of short and long-term incentives. Democratic hopefuls could receive a fundraising boost by embracing impeachment and energizing liberal donors. But some strategists and lawmakers say that a failed effort would only strengthen Mr. Trump's reelection chances, allowing him to further claim vindication. Standing out in the crowd, however, is Elizabeth Warren, who repeated her call for impeachment this weekend.
We cannot be an America that says it is okay for a president of the United States to try to block investigations into a foreign attack on our country or investigations into that president's own misbehavior. So I have called on the House to initiate impeachment proceedings.
Creighton, you cannot read the report and disagree with a word that Elizabeth Warren just said.
She's absolutely right. It's not about politics. I really want to say that again. It's not about politics. It's about the rule of law. It's about setting a precedent. Is the president above the law? He is not. It's about protecting our democracy. It's about the House, the Democrats in the House, doing their constitutional duty, which is making sure that there's a check and balance on this administration. And guess what? That's what in 2018, in the midterm elections, that's what's in part why they were given the majority in the House. And so we cannot walk away from this. And one more thing, Nicole, there's been a lot of talk about what Democrats are going to do. What are we going to do? How about Republicans?
I want to stay with you because you're plugged into the grassroots of the Democratic Party in a way that none of the rest of us is. And I feel like Democrats have lost control of the narrative. It is only being discussed as a political consideration. If the politics suck, and I've worked for people who don't care about politics sucking. You just look at their approval ratings. But if the politics suck and it's the right thing to do the Democrats have the backbone to say what you just said? Why is it on us to uphold the rule of law? Where's the Republican Party?
That's exactly right. Let's not forget back in Watergate, when it came down to Nixon stepping down, it was the Republicans that went to the White House, knocked on his door and said, it's over, dude. You got to go. And where's that courage? Where's that courage from the Republican Party? Where are they? And what they want to do is they want to investigate the investigator. They want to go back and go after Hillary Clinton and the emails. It is the most bizarre thing. And it's all because we talk about Donald Trump and how this loyalty to Donald Trump. And it's not about the country. It should not be about the party. It should be about the country.
Politics aside, is it the right thing to do go on a fact-finding mission around the president's obstruction?
The fact-finding aspects of this can be done without going to the full impeachment thing, which I think does two things. It inoculates Trump. It turns his
He's inoculated.
Yeah,
he's right. He can shoot people on. I don't.
Turns his base up to $1 billion. But what I think the smarter play is to go through the investigative process and drag this thing through, cause the political damage that a long term. I mean, remember, we investigated Benghazi for something like 57 years during Clinton. It allows them to drag these people up and to ask these questions that Robert Mueller couldn't fully cover because of classification or grand jury material. It allows them to get these people on the record. It allows people to have a clearer view of what goes on inside the Trump campaign in terms of their lust for Russian help. And their acceptance of it. It lets you go through what's their administration's like, lawless, reckless, shameless in every way. The problem with impeachment, though, as I've said before, is how do you get to 2/3 in the Senate? Because otherwise it doesn't matter. Donald Trump will wear it as a badge of honor. He loves the idea.
I guess my only pushback is he will anyway.
Yes,
he's a martyr. He doesn't need any. I mean, if he's a TV character, his character is martyr. He doesn't need any new plot lines.
He's been running on impeachment for over a year now.
I want something that's going to result in him leaving, not in everybody going, yeah, well, we showed him, and he laughs and goes off and has a steak dinner.
So Mitt Romney, of course, did condemn. You played the statement earlier, but two things he said. He said publicly what a lot of Republicans say privately, but aren't saying publicly because they're afraid of what the president will do to them. Yes. Also, Romney, yes, give him credit for the words, but he didn't call for any action. He didn't call for anything to change. He didn't call for anything to happen to the president. It is a calculation that Democrats are being very mindful of. Speaker Pelosi, just in the last hour or so, sent a letter to her members, and she said, while our views range from proceeding to investigate the findings of the Mueller report directly to impeachment, we all firmly agree. That you're saying there's a different. We all firmly agree to find the truth, but we differ how we get there. And then, but the very next sentence is, it is also important to know that the facts regarding holding the president accountable can be gained outside of impeachment hearings.
Well, I think that's actually right. I worked for a White House that was under investigation for 8 years, never impeached. Right. However, White House staffers, White House documents, emails, people had lawyers, and we were investigated for 8 years.
No question. And to your point, certainly an investigation itself can be a political act. You don't have to go to impeachment. But I also think this is Speaker Pelosi again tapping the brakes in the impeachment talk, which really has picked up steam in the last couple of days. After the redacted report was released, we saw Nadler's very telling comments earlier. There are Democrats who want to go down that path again. At least for now, Speaker Pelosi doesn't seem to.
Is this, let me play some of the other 2020 Democrats on the question this weekend.
Should the House pursue impeachment, Mayor?
You know, I'll leave that to the House. Certainly it's, well, again, my role is in the political process, and I think the best thing we can do to put an end to this kind of corruption and this style of politics is to relegate it to history by giving it a decisive defeat at the ballot box.
I believe that there is room for that conversation, but right now what I want is I want Mueller to come before Congress to testify.
This report is a step. It is about now continuing those investigations, about Congress doing their job. Mueller should come testify.
This is not the kind of language, Karine, that's going to get them in trouble. This is no rush to something that'll be a political boon to Donald Trump. This is, I hear a lot of caution. I hear a lot of sequencing. Let's hear from Mueller. Right. Now they're saying let's hear from McGahn. I mean, I don't see a misstep yet in this effort.
So the thing that's frustrating to me about it is because I feel like there's a little bit of blurring of the lines, if you will. So you can start impeachment proceedings and do everything that they're talking about. Bring Mueller, bring Barr if you want to, right? Bring McGahn and get to the bottom of it. But at least you're starting the process.
Can I give you
get
some
the
free
grand jury
advice?
documents.
Have lawlessness hearings. Stop calling them impeachment hearings.
That's a good idea.
Investigate lawlessness.
And Nicole, you could walk and chew gum. I'm starting to hate that term, but you could walk and chew gum at the same time.
Elizabeth Warren did it,
right? But you could talk about the issues. You could talk about, because a lot of people aren't talking about this in the states. They want to hear about what the Democrats are doing and still hold this president accountable.
And I'll just the last thing. They're all connected. I mean, his lawlessness and his obsession at corrupting an investigation is tied to the lawlessness with which his cabinet agencies are ignoring the needs of the most innocent people, the lawlessness that now pervades the Department of Homeland Security that's been gutted. I mean, it's all connected.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.